Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Thursday night session of the Extraordinary Technology Conference. Tonight we're going to be hearing from someone who has actually spoken here before, not for a little while, but he really stole the show a couple years back with wireless transmission of energy and an understanding of Tesla technology. It was pretty profound. Michael Leas, he's going to be presenting on exploring the force for unlimited power. He's a self-described garage explorer. He's also quite the artist. And an interesting note about his art, if you stare at his art and absorb, just absorb it, it will change your perspective. It will change your perspective on energy and reality. I know this from personal experience. He hails from Atascadero, California. And many years ago, he started on a journey of self-exploration of metaphysics, which led him to an understanding of the intricacies of energy. He studied all the greats, everybody in this field that is worth noting. He has delved into. So please give a warm welcome to Michael Leas.
I'll take it, but I think if I need it, that's cool. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, Vernon. Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to present what I consider something very passionate inside my own heart because of circumstances that happened in my own life. And I appreciate you all taking the time to come and check out what this is all about. So, you know, the main title up there is called the Magnevex Research Project. And I have developed a device that I call the Magnavax, the magnetic vortex. A lot of my ideas are a compilation of other people's work, and I cherry-picked the best I could find. And from that, I also found that other people through the course of time had the same concepts that came to them in their own evolution of ideas. So if we're ever to explore and get beyond things, we got to understand the science of energy. We're at a crux point in our own evolution. Whatever we're doing, whyever we're doing what we're doing, we need a new method. We need a new understanding of the principles of how things work. They're out there. If they are, we need to understand that and use that as part of our schooling to raise the kids to that new comprehension of what's going on. The science of energy, electricity, magnetism, the vortex, frequency, harmonics, oscillation, sine wave, and cyclic motion. I believe that Mother Nature has all of those components that oscillate and keep us all alive from within to without. You see the face of Nikola Tesla, Leonardo da Vinci. They were inspirations to me getting involved in this process. We're living in a sea of energy, and we're a part of it. We can't exclude ourselves from it. It's an impossibility. And why would we? It's what is sustaining our very fiber. It's what Mother Nature builds us to and with all the components that are around us. We just need to understand that it's out there. So can we find a method of natural power? Right now our means of method are wind, coal, gas, nuclear, and all the other things that are there, solar and what's out there. But is that really natural? Or have we kind of taken ideas and not really followed the pattern of what Mother Nature is presenting to us, the force? If you look at some of the things that happen in tornadoes or cyclones or anything else that goes on, even today, you've seen that there is a process that happens in nature. It builds from a small weather oscillation of energy, and it builds until it reaches a maximum, and then it discharges. In my own research, on whatever small scale it is, I've tried to take the principles of what I found in nature and tried to apply them to a machine. Electricity. It is the fiber of what keeps us alive. I believe it's the very sustaining force of all matter, all chemistry, all things that are out there. They all have an electrical oscillation of polarity movement of that sea that creates what they are. There are people that, I'm not just pulling these ideas out of my own rabbit out of my own hat, so to say. There are other ideas that people have presented that concur with what I'm speaking to you tonight. Nikola Tesla, I still believe that he is the master of lightning. He could harness it. He understood the process of how it is. And he still, to this day, is unknown of how he did what he did. We've had people who have tried it. We still don't understand the whole complexity of things. Sure, we're close. Maybe it is, but no one's replicated what he did or supposedly had done. A few years ago, like Vernon stated, in 2011, I did a presentation. I had about 20 coils. That's part of, another part of my research is in the Tesla wireless electricity. I've got a large main sender, which I have now been able to hook up to my generator, which will power my Tesla coil, which will give me a source. All things need a source. And from that, was able to change around the fields or whatever was happening in that to be able to run a wireless system, to be able to have some motors that are connected to another coil wirelessly across the room. Creative principles and laws of science. If we're ever to get anywhere, it's not about the thing. It has nothing to do with what's up front as the machine. It's really about what we understand as the principle that makes something function. Because in that, you can take that principle of that scientific understanding and apply it to the different facets of where the human evolution needs to go, whether in our food industries, whatever's out there. We need a new comprehension of how life moves together and how we're a part of all that. I was introduced to Walter Russell a few years ago. I didn't know anything about him. And it was because I had a few videos up online that showed the Magnavax, the first version that I built out of copper funnels. And in the process, a couple of friends of mine today had contacted me through the internet and say, hey, have you ever heard of Walter Russell? There's some interesting things there I think you would really like. And in the course of pursuing that, I found that some of the things that I was pursuing off the cuff were actually what Walter Russell was trying to describe in his ideas on the vortex, and even has a diagram from 1934 of this very concept. You can see it in up at the top in the corner. Without ever seeing that, I was replicating something that he had theorized on. And in the process of doing the 4 cones magnetic gear, I found a way to actually make a 6-cone magnetic gear. So if these gentlemen from ancient times, if you want to call it ancient times, or just the past, I'm standing on the shoulders of somebody else that said, hey, these are possibilities. Nikola Tesla, Walter Russell, there's another gentleman, Ernest Norman, Buckminster Fuller. They all steered us in certain directions of saying, hey, Mother Nature is telling you what to do. In the wave lies the secret of creation. I have also found that that's very true. My heartbeat, your heartbeat, everyone that's alive on this planet, we all fluctuate with the very rhythmic nature of life itself. It's what's going on. Let's just face it, that's a fact. Once we learn these things and be able to use these things in our systems, we'll be able to build unlimited energy. This was sent to me, you've heard of the Searle Magnetics. Anybody heard of Jason Verbelli? Whoever knows of Jason, Jason actually sent me this. He had seen the Magnavax. I'd sent him pictures. We've corresponded. And he says, there's something that I found that was on the internet. This was back in 1978, okay? I'd never seen this before. And Rieta was actually the one who wrote part of this. So if you're interested, you might want to check out what she's got, because the theory and ideas, without me ever knowing any of the theory ideas, coming across this and finding the similar thing means that we're now finding the 100th monkey concept. We're all starting to find the similar ideas, okay? Through the ethers or whatever you want to call it, mind-to-mind information, or just that we're finally coming to that point of observation. The blueprints to creation. I do believe that. Out on the table out there, I had a few things. I didn't think I'd bring them in, but I had some pine cones, a seashell, and they all have the similar design. This is supposedly love frequency, which is 528. It resonates with the heart. And part of the thing in our electrical systems is we fluctuate at 60 cycles. Everybody says, oh, it's dirty electricity. We have all these problems with all this stuff going in the ethers. I met the gentleman who actually developed the GFI. He was the first one who patented that. And he talked to me about things before he passed away, and he says, the biggest problem that is here, we have a non-tuned system. If we were to tune our system, to tune our grid like a musical orchestra, what you would find is we'd have a different operation of all the elements that we're involved with. So right now we have a dirty system, very dirty. We have so much spurious wavelengths of energy. It is non-conductive for a human being to fluctuate in the proper processes of what we are as part of that energy system. The pattern emerges, the atomic field. There is a replicated pattern that happens in nature. If we haven't seen it yet, man, open your eyes, because it's there. That golden means, that spiral, that Fibonacci sequence, it's everything we are, okay? And I'm going to try to shoot through these. Are 60 slides. I don't want to take all the time on the slides and demonstrating, so I want to actually do some demonstration of things, what I've done. But across the platform of nature, that same pattern emerges, whether in land, sea, or air. The golden ratio, there's a clockwise and a counterclockwise spiral. That is how I figured out how to get this gear to work. I have a Fibonacci spiral in that pattern, and it's based upon 4 spirals, actually 2, a positive spiral and a negative spiral. And from that, what I figured, which goes a little deeper, but in man, every single person has that spiral too. Buckminster Fuller was into the same concepts, and he found the similar designs. Buckminster Fuller's name for the geometry advance based on the patterns of energy you saw in nature. So going back to, let me see where the slides are. I kind of lost my point of space here. But he developed that geodesic dome because he found in the most simplest pattern of that triangle was the greatest strength, okay? So when you go and you start looking at, the different things that are out there, we have not yet built, like Tesla said, our machines that are hooked up to the wheel work of nature. So in my mind, as I'm reading this stuff and figuring things, and I'm saying, okay, well, how can we do that? Okay, hypothetical, what if I take a magnet and I put it in a spiral on a vortex? Why? A vortex? What else is out there that is most powerful? You look at the tornadoes, you look at cyclones, you look at how water runs down in a river, it creates a little eddy currents. Those are the things that are going on, okay? So what if? You got to ask the question, what if? And when I did place those onto the first little setup I made, I bought plastic funnels from the Home Depot, the red, blue, and green ones that you can buy on a little kit, and I super glued magnets onto it in that spiral, and I was able to drop another magnet in there, and with a little bit of oscillation, I was get it to spin. That was my first impulse. It was the spark of ideas. From that, it took me a long time to figure out how many spirals, how many magnets, where and what and why, but I was able to come up with a pattern and a formula, which is now patent pending on how that is established. So we're born from stardust. I'm not telling you anything that I have any greater knowledge than any of you. It's just that I've had probably maybe more struggles to overcome because of my own past of things that I got involved in. Growing up through college where the drinking and partying and losing out on being a college student, it brought me to the brink of total disillusion where I had to totally heal myself. And in the process of beginning to look at what energy is, that process of understanding all of these different things led me into the research. So really it's a self-centered based idea that we're all the same, we all function along similar lines of ideas, so why can't we now take that principle and build it into our electrical, our magnetic systems? Man the fulcrum. We are the ones that move that force, okay? So we can move it in a positive direction or in a negative direction. That's our choice. That's our freedom, okay? We can build a bomb. We can blow each other up and destroy each other. Whoop-de-doo. What have you proven? Have you really expanded the horizons of man's intelligence? Doesn't look like it. We've crushed it. So there's a lot going on right now. There's some very beautiful stuff that's out in the halls here on what could be done with that type of technologies, on helping people who are seriously sick. If I had some of this information when I was down and out, it would have really helped me out. I didn't have that, and I had to struggle through to find that. Today, it's there, but it's not in the hands of those that can help other people. The electromagnetic biofield of the heart. We have to put a few things together to see how a running system works, okay? And I probably missed a couple points that I wanted to bring out, but I'll try to readdress them here. There's a magnetic patterning that we've all been taught about the shape of the field around a magnet. I believe that that is wrong. And after years of just looking at magnetic fields and just not taking the compass and watching the compass direction go around that, I also visualize that there's something else going on in an invisible realm that we don't see. And it actually comes from within, not without. What we see on the outside is the effect of what's transpiring from within side of not only a magnet, but inside of things. We see the exterior of stuff. We don't see the inside of what's really going on. The masters, the esoteric masters, Jesus, Buddha, they all searched for the kingdom within. Why? Because that's the source. It's the great electromagnetic field, it's the God force, whatever you want to call it. There's a multitude of names that are out there, but there is a sustaining power that can be used that I believe some of the ancient societies were, because of their own hypothetical reasoning, that they were able to tap into that. Can we do it? I think we're getting close, I really do. Another gentleman I studied or have gotten into is Dr. Ernest Norman. He founded the Unarius Academy of Science. I basically have taken some of his materials and done my own individual research into some of his works. Offside of what the Academy's doing, they've got their own thing going on, but some of the information that he had brought through made certain things very apparent to me that there's something more going on than the exterior world. Like all things large or small, the earth and all its creatures have been created from the sublime spiritual stuff. Each thing, though it may appear different, is a highly developed, organized system of tiny solar systems of energy, and in these, in turn, claim as their parents the very substance of the infinite mind. When you really get down to the basics of what it is all about, it's mind. Tesla knew that. Einstein knew that. Walter Russell knew that. There is nothing else. It is the force. And the force that we're connected to through our own individual perception that we can grow. We can grow it along those Fibonacci designs, because you can compound and add to the very structure of who and what you are. Life will grow as the tree is bent. So as you grow, either positive or negative, according to what you process within your system, that's what becomes you. That's what I had to learn. The macrocosm. It's out there. And the microcosm, it's out there also. And we stand somewhere in between as the fulcrum of those two spectrums. We are in the present moment of time, so to speak. You got the future, transposes through the moment, and that moment transposes into the eternal past, which also becomes part of the foundation of what your future is all about. The key to unlocking the energy secrets, the sine wave. Ernest Norman also said the same thing. So there's other people that have repeated that information and said, hey, there's something here. What can we do with that sine wave? So in my own research, I wanted to know how to unlock the power of that magnet. because there's something there. It's unique in the elements that we see. We can feel it, we can touch it. It does something. You can call it positive, negative, or repelling, or whatever it does. There's something unique about that alignment and the property of how that works, okay? Let me read you a couple little things here. This is from Tom Bearden, and we're talking about free energy and just different things. And he goes, nature has been most kind, and we have been most ignorant. You can have all the trapped electrical energy you wish from any source of potential for free. You can power all the external loads you wish for free by using a collector as a secondary source and simply shuttling between the primary source and the collector. But you cannot have power for free in the potential. So in that sense, it's talking about the movement of the sine wave. So in the same thing, it brought me to other people who are finding the same thing. Howard Johnson. He's kind of an unknown, but the things that he walked into and he discovered back when he was working on things, and I have his video, and he said, this is important. It is. The thing that he uncovered was that vortex. Again, it appeared. So there must be something there, okay? Here I'm walking into this stuff, exploring things, and this is what I'm finding. And I'm finding similar people who have hit on the same information of saying, hey, so let's put it all together. What does it do? What are we trying to do with that? We're trying to tap the field. His idea, and you can kind of see, he described that a magnetic field is not what you see. There's not one particular north and a particular south. There's actually a dominant north and a subdominant south of the polarity of the magnet, and there's actually a dominant south and a subdominant north. And they oscillate between each other in an invisible realm that creates what we see on the outside as what can be mapped or measured as the field, so-called field. But where does that come from? I have always found that it came from within. I will always go back to that. If we can find what is the principle that moves from whatever spectrums or quadrants or whatever you want to call it, because there's still an unknown language of how we can describe these things. Here's another, Albert Roy Davis and Walter, they have the same thing where they have found that there's a difference, that they have shown that magnetic fields are not the way we've been taught. They've used their ideas and to help heal cancer in the proper placement of how the magnet's placed within a system that helps the body align itself, because we do at times need a crutch, but there's soon enough once you understand you got to throw the crutch away, because you are that principle you're trying to understand also. So this leads us to this point of the hands-on demo. Because in my own experiments, do I have a free energy device to kind of pop the balloon? No, I do not. But I have found things that are very unique to what I'm researching. Am I searching for a free energy device? I'm looking for a balanced energy system. I don't want something for free. I want to trade. I want to give so I can receive. If you want something for free, it means you haven't put the work out. Okay? That's just the way it works. Nature does that. It starts with that seed. Bam, it's got to drop into the ground. Sometimes there's a seed that lands for a long time until a forest fire comes and it burns it. And that's the only time it'll come alive. After the rains, it'll start. You go to Colorado, that's one of the things I learned when I was in scouting. That's part of the reason why some of these fields lay dormant for a long time. Fire comes by, bam, now you have trees growing. So the potential is what has to happen. Somehow you have to find the connection, the contact, that linkage between those things. I've showed you the ideas with Howard Johnson. I want to read you a few things that kind of help support where I'm trying to steer this idea without running out of time. So where are we at on stuff? 7:30. Going back to Tesla from the very beginning. There's a book out there by Leland Anderson, and it is Tesla's trial where he's trying to defend his patent. And in there he describes how his system worked. And I'd like to read you 2 paragraphs. Well, I'll put them up here. And you were telling me, Otto, how do I set that up on top? You can read them with me, or I'll try to read them out loud. But they're in that book. If you get a chance, they have it out on the table at the TeslaTech table. It's worth the read. Along with reading Tesla's information about his Colorado Spring notes, there's a lot of good information in there on how he oscillated that energy and how he was able to get what he got. In this paragraph, because he did this for electricity, and I believe if we're ever going to unlock the code, that what's going to happen, we're going to have not only magnetism, but electricity. In my own experience and my experience with magnetic motors, I believe someone will get a pure magnetic motor to run, but when you put a heavier load on it, it'll break the continuity of what that magnet motor can do. You have to have the other polarity of life, electricity. They're twins of the same mother, but they do different things at different times, and at different spaces and different spatial zones, or whatever the language is used to call out. What I'm trying to work with is a mechanical operation, because where I'm leading this is where I'm going with my experiments of now what I'm building upon. This is something that Nikola Tesla wrote, and he goes, yes, but it was a different kind of circuit. And he goes, of course, the advantage of this apparatus was the delivering of energy in short intervals whereby one could increase the activity. With the scheme, I was able to perform all those experiments, which have been reprinted from time to time. I would take energy out of a circuit at rates of hundreds of thousands of horsepower. In Colorado, I reach 18 million horsepower activities, but that was always by this device. Energy stored in a condenser, which is a capacitor, and discharged in an inconceivably small interval of time. You could not produce that activity with an undamped wave. The damped wave is of an advantage because it gives you, with a generator of 1 kilowatt, an activity of 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 kilowatts, whereas if you have a continuous or undamped wave, 1 kilowatt gives you only 1 wave energy at a rate of 1 kilowatt. What you put in, what you get out. That's just been the struggle everybody's been looking at, myself included. But in something that I've reasoned around with, and I think Eric Dollard had showed some things, is that this is our 60 cycles. This is our electricity today. It's kind of sloppy, it does what it does. In Tesla's system, it was under tension. And it didn't go up and down, it went back and forth at a very high frequency and at a very high rate. What he ended up doing is he put tension in the field. He put tension in the field. And that's what we would have to do. Here we go. 5-minute interval. Moved around too much? Dancing? I'm animated. I've always have been. It's, my wife tells me, can you slow down a little bit? So we go hiking a lot. How's that? I'll try not to move as much. But it's just trying to give you I'm trying to be the experiment itself so you can kind of see what's happening.
It's just the break dancing you got to stay away from.
Yeah, there you go. But if you go back and let me read this last little bit, because this is where I'm trying to do something mechanically. I have refined this so much so that I've been able to take energy out of an engine by drawing on their momentum. For an instant, if this engine is of 200 horsepower, I take the energy out for a minute interval of time, minute interval of time, at the rate of 5,000, 6,000 horsepower. Then I store it in a condenser and discharge that at the same rate at several millions of horsepower. So, let me take you through a series of complexities that are going on in today's world. We can generate electricity, but if you don't use it, you lose it. We're stuck in this quandary of having to put it into some type of battery or something to keep it moving. So we haven't learned how that the field is the source. We haven't learned to tap that yet, so that anywhere, any place, any time, it becomes part of our instruments, okay? We haven't learned to become part of the activation of that field. Here's another thing by this Ernest Norman. These are part of validity of my own research, of why I'm going down the rabbit hole the way I'm going down it, and these are reasons why. Here's another thing this Ernest Norman wrote, and he goes, other evidence, let's see, he describes the pulse as the heartbeat of light, the sustaining operation of high-frequency electromagnetic spiritual energy. You can call it whatever you want. You know, the religionists, however, call it spirit. But there's a different formula scientists are going to want to call that. But it's a chi energy. We don't really know, but we know there's something that's going on, okay? So he states in one of his many articles, any third-dimensional process which involve production of electromagnetic energy are merely ways and means of aligning already existing electromagnetic forces into specific channels whereby the magnetic reaction can be produced. Allegorically speaking, this can be compared to drawing water from a faucet. Everyone knows the faucet is connected to the central reservoir. Even though it is hundreds of miles away, the same holds true in electromagnetic energy. As of today, scientists believe the water or energy comes purely from the faucet. He is not aware of the reservoir or the connecting linkage, which can be pictured as various dimensions, and the actual electromagnetic energy which appears from the central reservoir, which he reproduces this energy in one of the well-known present-day forms. So we haven't really put the whole process together, that there's something else, that when we build our devices, we're really only raising that potential to allow that other potential of the source, the very atomic fields or whatever you want to call it, to allow it a passage through into our society. Even these huge generators you see out there standing, burning coal or whatever it is, we've taken the potential of all that energy, whatever it might be, even the construction of it, in and of itself, we've amalgamated the mass or the energy of that construction of that, and we've created a passageway for that whole potential of the sustaining force of what that is to now flow through that system. Walter Russell also stated some of the same things. So again, I'm pulling out this information of saying, wow, all of these guys seen the similar concept. He had something called the Optic Dynamo generator, and I'm sure the Walter Russell University there, the guys there can explain more of that. But in the paper that was sent to me, he's got this new, he writes up, and it's the first paragraph. The new power and light generator employs a multiplication principle of nature, which has not yet entered within the realm of human consciousness. Just as the principle of electronics or atomic energy has not entered human consciousness 50 years ago, it is more important than electronics is. However, for it opens the door to a new era of higher electronics, higher mathematics, or transmutation. It is the principle of growth in nature. We all know that. That's an unstoppable force. I don't care what anybody says. It's an unstoppable force, which multiplies one kernel of corn into thousands, or of which multiplies gases of -0 melting point into solids over 300 or 3,000 degrees, or multiplies the cold of space into hot stars and novas into incredibly high temperatures. Nature's principles are giving us the answer of how these things work. So in my own observations, and this kind of leads us to the hands-on point, to where and why I filed for a patent. There are some things that in my own research, was it important? Do I want it that way? Is it, okay, I don't know. I couldn't stand here and talk to you today without having something to say, hey, this is what I found. Because if I just came out and said that, somebody else is going to come by and say, no, you didn't find that. I found that because you told me how to do it and I just changed a little bit. I mean, what's wrong with this world? This is where we are, people. I mean, we're just trying to explore the reasoning of truth, aren't we? We're all fighting against each other. Who's on top? Whoopee! I'm the king. King of the crown. We've been doing that for so many years. Ain't we done with it yet? That's what gets me. It's like, why do I even want to share with people if that's what the whole problem is? I don't know. So Hey, very cool, thanks for the lights. I was going to say, yeah, if we could do that. So if we can go back to the slides, because that's all the points that are on top, and I'll try to bring it up to a couple of things. The Living Vortex, it's for real. I made that, it was back in that's off of 94. I did a presentation because I was theorizing on these things back then. And I made this out of a piece of flat copper. I spun it around a pipe to get my cone. I soldered it up, I press fit all them magnets into it. That was my first one I made. The Magnavax. That's the video that was up on the internet for a long time. It had two cones that were attached in the middle. The top one sat above the bottom one. It always had a problem. It always had a Humpty Dumpty, where, you know, the magnet, the gate, it was a dump, you know, but I could get it up and running. I could get the top one to turn the bottom one. That was number one. Number two, I took the challenge and said, okay, there's something here. You know, I'm going to spend the money, whatever it is, I'll drop it on the credit card, and that's what you do. So I enlisted a friend of mine who was a mechanical engineer. He drew me up some blueprints off of that copper one I made, and I had them machined, and I put the gear together. It did not work the way I thought it would, so I spent the money. But from that process, it taught me the lesson of what the problem was. I had them connected. And once I released them in the middle and freed them up, it gave me the gear. So we do have an actual functioning, working gear that does something different than Magnavax number one. I took that machine, took it back to the machine shop, and I had him make it like that. It's not what I want, but it's what it is. I exchanged the parts and remachined it with the magnets in it. It was kind of tricky for him to do. So that's what we ended up having. So you have four, you have two clockwise, two counterclockwise. It's based on that whole concept that nature has shown us. Clockwise pattern, counterclockwise pattern, Fibonacci design. From that, what if, my mind asked that question again, what if I dropped two more cones on that? I was able to get the 6-axis gear. So to do that with mechanical gears, I think it would be very complex. You would have a problem where it would strip the gears because of the way they're meshing. They wouldn't have the same orientation of being able to be free and to stop one and spin it, a breakaway, you know, torque, different applications of things. What I found that I thought was very unique, and this is where I'm going with my research at this moment in time, is that becomes a flywheel. What ends up happening when you run the 6-axis gear up and running is that it cancels out that gyroscopic force. Sometimes we want the gyroscopic force, but if we can cancel it out on different applications, that could be part of the reason why motors always have a problem, because we're always fighting nature. We're not fighting all the back EMF and all the things. We're fighting the principles of nature. Once we understand the principles and we move with those principles, we'll unlock those secrets as to how things work. It won't allow us to work. Nature's that way. She'll give you every answer you want if you work with her. But if you want to govern it, you're going to hit the block wall. That's just the way nature is. That's been my experience with it. So 4-axis gear, 6-axis gear, it can be used for a multiple of things in my own mind. That's kind of what I've developed out. It's non-friction contact, shaft misalignment. I have found that you can take one of those cones and you can misalign it in any orientation. Let's say you had two couplings and there was an overdrive of one shaft. You know, had it hooked up to a conveyor belt and it jammed. It would unjam. It wouldn't snap your shaft or break your gears. It would uncouple because of the strength of the magnetic field. Also, if you wanted to clutch it in, you could clutch it in. Over RPM, 90-degree axis, multiple axis, non-gyroscopic effects. and rotating flywheel assembly, smooth gear rotation. A lot of magnet motors I've seen, they all have a certain Humpty Dump. In this array, what I have found, and there's been research papers, somebody else made a bevel gear over in China and some other research places that have gone on, where they align the magnets straight up and down around the cone. And it creates a certain cogging as it goes around. It'll work and it'll transfer the torque between one element and another. But I found, and this may be just me in my own garage experiments, it's never been proven by anybody, this is just what I found. But it's a very smooth acting gear, okay? So, what I want to do is run a few things, because where I'm going with my research is right now in what's happening in society, we have a problem with energy storage. And flywheels are now coming online. There are municipalities, or actually hospitals, for bypass energy. When the power goes out, flywheel kicks on, bam, you got transfer of power. That flywheel runs down for 8 hours. They've had some that are actually running for 24 hours on the downhill run to generate electricity. In the old times, some people may have seen it, their grandfathers may have had one, but there was a device called the hit and miss engine. And it would run on a little bit of kerosene for a time. It's on the cotton gin or the old tractors. And you had a little bit of kerosene, it would fire the piston on a certain time, then it had a governor. When the flywheel got slow enough, it would fire that piston once again. My idea, and if the other ideas have proven to be true, I'm going along the rabbit's hole of conquest of saying, let's do that with an electromagnetic field and a pulse. If you change out the piston to an electromagnetic pulse, stored from the potential of concepts that Tesla said, store that in a capacitor, discharge it in an instant, you now have a piston push, okay? I'm sure there's a lot of theories that say it's impossible to do. I don't care. Everybody said everything. I'm not schooled, so I don't have to buck that. I can go and explore on my own. That's what I'm doing. So, does it run? Yes. Does it do anything? Yeah. It turns up to speed. Okay? So, it's based on a pulse motor. It's got a few pulses that are coming off a bottom set of coils that turn, one in a clockwise rotation, another in a counterclockwise rotation. These two cones on the outside are my motors. These two on this outside are my generators. Now what's happening is, John Bedini's right on in his ideas. You can capture that spike off the collapse of that coil. I've now taken that spike off the collapsing of that coil, run it through a bridge rectifier. It's now charging a secondary battery on the side, okay? It takes one battery on this side, which could be in the components of those that understand the mathematics and all the different things of how to make it work, to take that battery which runs, there's a MOSFET, series of MOSFETs that were robbed out of a golf cart. A friend of mine helped me, and then there's an electronic eye that tells the coils when to turn on and off. To interloop that, if the Fibonacci sequence is true for magnetic fields, why should it not be true for electric fields? Why can we not pulse things? That pulse that you just heard is what is now charging my capacitor. They're loading, but the load is not on the machine, because every time that capacitor is being loaded, the pulse coils of the machine are off. And the only thing that's running is the momentum and inertia into the machine. Yes, I had to put momentum and inertia. I understand all the laws that everybody has said. I understand. I know it's a struggle. It's hard. It's going to be hard to overcome these things. So let's see if this is actually firing through. Because at first, today, and it could have been the hot heat that's happening, it's not. So let me grab this just to make sure. So I'm pushing about 200 volts off the generator side, DC. It lugged the machine, okay? There's something in here in this switch when I moved it and traveling across 14 hours of time and rattling in the back of my truck. But it worked. I don't know, there was another gentleman here that he's seen me work it first. It worked. We had the same problem firing it up. This one works, so I'll show you that. But this is what's going on, is that you now have your flywheels that are now carrying the mass and the momentum. I'm not draining off my battery system. It's just taking the concept and exploring it and extrapolating it a little bit differently. I'm using a hit and miss principle that was out years ago. It could be done with all electronics governing. The guys that are running the Formula Ones, they're doing the regenerative Kern's energy regenerative systems, they're all doing it on the computers. I just need somebody to take that idea and run it down. You know, I don't have that type of knowledge and stuff. I've got the mechanics of it. This is from came out of a microwave. I took the coil off just so you can see that things will run. Let me not drop it into the machine, because it's just positive and negative. It's an induction, okay? There's your pure magnet motor. It's running off of magnets, turning the fan. Okay, all it is, because there's a polarity of positive, polarity of negative, and the rotation of the magnets, which is what's going on in electricity. You have the oscillation. That sine wave principle is very real on many different things. Okay? So let's take this real quick just so you can see it does. This is out of a sewing machine motor. And let's take this guy. That's a downhill run. Bill Mueller did the same thing on some of his work, the downhill run. We don't use the downhill run. What we do is load the front end of our power input. Bring your power input up. You want it to carry the machine. Why do I want it to carry the load? So what I've done is separated the two. I've got a motor and I've got a generator. The motor spins the generator, which is a flywheel, magnetic flywheel, which on the downhill run, coming down the roller coaster, turns on, pulses on. You have a timing cycle with a pulse on, pulse off, and that's what fills my capacitor. So the input never sees the load, and I've done it mechanically on a small little operation. So on the 6-axis, similar concept happens, but this one's set up a little differently. Yeah, a friend of mine said you can do this all on Arduinos. I'm not really good at the computer. You know, I worked in a machine shop, then I worked in a printing trade, now I do construction. So mechanical things are a little more easy for me. Yeah, well, the computer guys and the mathematicians can figure those things out. So it's chopping, and it's also chopping the pulse. What's happening now, every on-off cycle is loading that capacitor. All I'm asking the motor to do is to turn the generator, nothing else. It's not turning my load. Let me get these. There's so many things that from the experiments that now I know what to do, and it just takes time, money, energy, and funding to drive it in a new direction. So this kind of brings it back to my conceptualization is that energy, that's life's interdimensional equation, whether here or hereafter, whatever that may be for each one of us. But there's a principle of sustainment that whether Walter Russell, Nikola Tesla, other masters, or whoever you want to call them of our time, energy individuals who are researching these things, once we understand that principle, then we can do that and drop it in. Even in our today, modern day generators, we fill them up, we have it load the whole system, and that whole system carries the load of how many thousands of houses out there? You need a bridge. And that bridge, we need to dump the load, move that across the bridge, fill the capacitor, move that on. So there has to be a cycle of on and off. You can't breathe in while you breathe out. Your heart does pulsations, in, out, Why not build our machines along similar items? That's what it's all about. That's what I have believed as a garage explorer. So it's kind of a theory that I put together, the electromagnetic vortex theory. And it's a composite of a lot of people's ideas. It's not just my own. I can't claim the originality of it. All I can claim is that I cherry-picked this information, and that's what I found. So that, it may not be right, but it led me to some conclusions, and it led me to some ideas on how things in nature, that if I take from nature, she's my teacher, even though, yes, I've had many teachers, but we have, that is what I consider as a magnet, okay? In our schooling, we see the field, but we don't see the invisible, okay? There's something inside a magnet that comes to without. It's not what comes from without, even though there is a from an out to within, but it comes from within to without. And we've got it pretty much backwards on this world. So somehow in our engineering, and somehow in our understanding, somehow in our physics, and maybe I'm completely off, but the direction of evidence that I'm laying before you is kind of showing that other people found that similar information along the timeline of life. So is it a passion for me? Yeah, you know, I can take it or leave it. I'm at the point now where I can walk away because I understand what I found for myself. It helped me conclude some things that I know that there is a regenerative energy system that can be built. Are we wise enough to use that in the proper passageway through life without blowing each other up? Well, because who controls power controls the world, right? Who controls the weather controls the world, right? I mean, come on. I mean, we're all living on this, like Buckminster Fuller said, spaceship Earth. So, you know, why do we need to have a spaceship? We can't even fly this thing right. You know, we're destroying it faster than it can regenerate itself. It's a universal spiral. And that's where it all began. We're part of that spark of intelligence. So, I'm leaving it at that. And that's my, actually I got one last little experiment. It's all fun. You can show this to kids. I always showed it as a kid. And you got to have fun things, right? This is one of these little gadgets. It's a pulse. The only way to make it work is to make it pulse, okay? But you can see there's a crescendo of energy that happens. And if you can store that energy, and that's what nature does in her own process. We've seen the storm come out today. It built from the clouds. And it finally got to that high crescendo point where that, call it electrostatic, whatever you want it, then bam, it dropped all the rain. Now it's going to drift away. It helped. Mother Nature on the ground needed that pulse. There's your pulse right there. She allowed it to come through, the wave in the ocean. Bam, there's your wave. It goes from one side to the other, cyclic motion. So these are just ideas that I'm throwing out there just for exploring the force. So,
thank you, Michael Leas. If you have questions,
I hope that was entertaining enough for you.
yeah, you can stay and you'll come back next year too.
There you go.
If you have questions, please come on up to the green square.
I'll bring the Tesla coils.
Absolutely.
And we'll fire them up off of this machine.
Fantastic. I love
We'll
it.
work out the
Let's do a full workshop where we actually have it all in sequence and powering each other.
It would be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Any questions? Come on, guys. We just had a lecture on the force for crying out loud. Come on up.
Did you try magnets of different strengths?
Please
Did he
step
work
up to
with
the Q&A, Mike, so that it'll be on the DVD. Please come over here.
It might be easier to walk to him, maybe?
Oh, yeah, I see. Okay.
Are these magnets of different strengths? No.
Yeah, I just wondered if you'd tried magnets of varying strength in proportion to the size of the the cone?
Not in that vein, but I have tried weaker magnets spinning it, and it does work. But I could see what you're saying, where you have a weak one at the start and a very strong one at the end. I mean, there's probably endless experiments. I hope I stimulated some mind thoughts here. I mean, there's things now that I opened a passageway of ideas, go for it. I mean, that's what's going to happen. I'm just going to, like my brother told me, hey, you're probably not going to be the one who finds all the stuff, but you're going to be a piece of the puzzle that helps the puzzle go together. So take the ideas. I mean, what can you do with them? I mean, there's endless opportunities. Magnets they're the most fascinating things I've ever got my hands into. And I'm hooked. You know, if there's ever anything, electricity and magnetism, I've respected it. I've gotten shocked, almost knocked me out a couple times, but I've learned to respect that there's, it's something to respect as Mother Nature herself.
Well, thanks. Great talk. I really liked it. Have you noticed any other anomalies with it, like heat or temperature or gravitational effects?
The one that's out on the table, like I said, it cancels the gyroscopic effect. But the only other thing I can say is about me, when I'm working on it, I feel really good. I think it's part of the alignment. When I first started, I knew that there was things that I was unaligned with. But when I started finding the magnets, I actually felt things, and it may be my own esoterical balancing, so to say. And I laid on the Tesla lights table, and I believe that can help align, it's all part of your own thinking. But in placing the magnets in the right placement, I did feel that, wow, that feels better. Because when they were out of placement, I mean, I've tried, you have no idea the amount of experiments I did with the flywheels to get it to rotate. I put 5 of the North Pole out, 7 of the other, and I mean, a multitude of things that just went to the trash. But when I found one, I also found that I actually felt better when this thing was spinning. Because you got to remember, when this thing's spinning, there's an etheric field that you don't see that's going on. There's a vortex here, because you can hold this magnet up in here and you can feel it. You can feel it. So it is, if we're generating things out in the world, here's the simple experiment that I was showing earlier. Let's see if I can get this set up that you guys can see it. We are, like I said, living in a sea of energy, okay? That magnet is now balanced on its edge, okay? I don't know if you can see that or not. Okay? Every motor, everything that has an inductive force, there's your movement of the sea. I am moving a magnet in my hand, and that's moving that magnet on the bench. Okay? So what that means is that every single thing that has a magnetic field is moving in a constant oscillation, because you have that stream of electrons, you have the thing. That's why we're a part of the plasma, if you want to call it, why we're able to morph and grow from a child to an adult and then die and go on from wherever we understand that where we go. I have a different concept than most, so.
One more question. Have you tried with your mind to actually interact with those fields, and did you find any effects there?
I did that creation of that. That was a mind, it was a thought that came to me. And people say, well, do you interact with the mind? That is my mind. This is my mind that I just laid out in front of you. And that's how it works. When people think that, hey, you can do this, in the old days somebody was able to say, and this is a poltergeist, it's a spirit from beyond because they didn't see the table, the magnet underneath the table, and the magnets are moving. It's all mind. This is my mind. That's, every one of us has that aura of information that we are. What ended up happening to me, wherever the seeds got dropped in from whatever happened in my life in the course of time for me to overcome, to have to learn how to heal myself, this dropped in with it. And all I did is unveil it.
Thank you, Michael Leas.
Very cool. All right.